Someday I'll find her. Long, long ago in the town of Oshogun in Nigeria, there lived a little 12-year-old African boy by the name of Ajay. Those were the days when the cruel Muslim Fullah tribesmen used to attack some peaceful Yoruba township, carry off all the prisoners they could catch, and then sell them to the Portuguese slave traders. So it happened one day that, all unexpected, the fierce Fullah warriors surrounded the little town of Oshogun. Ajay's father was killed with scores of other brave men who tried their best to defend the little town, and Ajay, his two sisters, a younger brother, and his mother were among the many people who were taken as prisoners to be sold as slaves. For about 3 months he was close enough to his mother so that he could see her every day, but one night he was bound and carried away. He was taken from place to place till at last he found himself in Lagos, the city on the coast where the Portuguese slave traders loaded their slaves into big ships and took them off to be sold in the faraway countries of the world. One morning, soon after this, while he was playing on the sandy beach with a turtle, he saw a rowboat with four white men in it coming from a ship that had anchored a little distance away in the deep water. He wondered where they were going and what they were going to do. But he didn't have very long to wonder, for as soon as the rowboat touched the sandy beach, the four men jumped out and seized Ajay. They tied his hands and feet, lifted him into the rowboat, and rowed off to the ship. Here they opened a big door below the deck and threw him inside the big dark room with 187 other slaves that they had bought. For these men were Portuguese slave traders, and their ship was a slave ship. It was so dark that 12-year-old Ajay couldn't tell whether it was day or night. The realization that he was in a slave ship and was to be carried away to some far country and sold filled him with terror. He burst into tears and cried as if his little heart would break. Where was he going? Would he ever get back to his country? Where was his mother now? Would he ever see her again? These thoughts kept racing through his mind. He cried and cried till he cried himself to sleep. But just before dropping off to sleep, he clenched his fists and gritted his teeth and said to himself, I will, someday I'll find my mother. He doesn't know just how many days or maybe weeks went by, but one day there was the sound of battle on the deck overhead. Men were shouting and running here and there, guns were booming, swords were clashing. Then after what seemed to be a long time there was silence, and after the silence heavy footsteps approached the door of the big room where the slaves were kept. The poor slaves wept and wailed and clung to each other, thinking their end had come and that all of them would be killed. But the door opened and the big pleasant voice called out, "You are free! You are free! We are the sailors from the British battleship, the HMS Myrmidon. We are doing our best to put an end to slavery. We have put the slave traders in prison. Now come with us onto our battleship and we'll take you to a new town here in West Africa that we have just established for freed slaves, called Freetown, Sierra Leone." Hardly believing the good news, the freed slaves went aboard the British battleship, and before long they walked down the gangplank into Freetown as free people. And Ajay walked down the gangplank with them. As he stepped onto the landing, the first thought that came to him was, maybe my mother is here. Maybe if I look carefully, I will find her here. So, as he walked along through the streets of Freetown toward the village which the British had made for freed slaves, he looked into the face of every woman he saw. He looked and he looked, but he did not find his mother. But I will. I'll keep looking for my mother, he said to himself as he clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. And someday I'll find her. I will. Life in the free settlement was interesting and exciting. The missionaries in charge had established a school so that all who wanted to learn could do so, and all who wanted to learn some trade or handicraft could do so. One of the missionaries looked at Ajay and said, "Would you like to go to school, my boy?" "Oh, yes, sir, I certainly would, sir," he replied. "Then I'll tell you what," said the missionary. "I have a little room with a nice little bed in it, just the right size for a little boy like you. And if you would promise to look after my garden and the chickens, you could stay in that little room and go to school too." "Oh, yes, sir," said Ajay breathlessly. "I would love to do it, sir, and I would do my very best, sir. I would, sir." So Ajay went to live with the missionary teacher. His first day in school was exciting. Those ABC letters had sounds, and if he learned them, he would soon be able to read. When he found his mother, he wanted her to be proud of him, didn't he? So of course he must learn to read. So he rushed out of school, begged a halfpenny from a friend, and bought himself an alphabet card. And after that, wherever he was, you could hear him saying A B C D F G H I J K L M N O P. And if he was sitting down to rest, you would see him making A's, B's, and C's with his finger in the dust. In 6 months, he could read, and in 4 years, when he was 16, he was baptized. Now, in Africa, the Christians love to be given new names when they are baptized. So after this, Ajay was called Samuel Crowther. Samuel, because he gave his heart to Jesus when he was just a boy, and maybe Crowther was the name of the missionary who first befriended him. We don't know for sure. The year after he was baptized, he was taken to England by some missionaries who were going on furlough, and he spent 1 year in school there. When he returned to Freetown, he was among the first 6 young men to enter the newly established college. After 3 more years, Samuel married Susanna, a young Yoruba woman who had been rescued from the slave traders like himself, and then he became a teacher in that same college. About 10 years later, in 1841, the British government sent a party of men with 2 ships to explore the country through which the great Niger River flows. They needed a translator who could speak the Yoruba language, and arriving at the settlement in Freetown, they heard of Samuel Crowther. Will you come with us? They asked. To the Yoruba country? Asked Samuel. Why, that's my